Welcome to the next episode of my series on managing performance pressure for students, athletes, and those with career challenges. Today, I'm going to comment a little bit more on how I personally worked with meaning to succeed despite lots of adversity and innumerable setbacks in my careers, both academically, at work, and in my recreations. So one of the bizarre things that I did early on in my life was a whole lot of cave diving, pretty extreme activity, a little bit like skydiving. FYI, I don't really have a death wish, but certainly I really enjoyed challenging myself and achieving mastery of things. The funny part about me learning to dive was that I started off with a great fear of having my head in the water. So don't ask me how I ended up on the trajectory of a cave diver. At any rate, there's been lots of peaks and a whole lot of troughs as well along the journey. And my intention today is for you to really get a sense that you're not alone in the struggle that you experience. It's a universal human phenomena. It's not so much what's being thrown at us, it's how we handle it really at the end of the day. So a couple of things I came up against early on, as I mentioned, getting my head in the water, the fears, the idea that in my career or in my skydiving, I could hurt others, even thinking that, and at some stages knowing that at times I felt responsible for outcomes that affected others, even inadvertently. It's pretty difficult to get my head around the embarrassment, the guilt, the shame that went with that, if it was public, the ideas about not being good enough. Alongside of that, teachers, bosses, colleagues, and other competitors who actively ridiculed and dismissed me. Some of them skydivers, this far away, face to face. So some of that was pretty rough riding and demoralizing, as you can imagine. Lost jobs, lost colleagues' support. And this certainly challenged me internally. So what helped me to get through some of these troughs? Well, as I mentioned before, and using Michael Jordan as an example, if you really know what's special to you, hang on to that because it's really precious. What got me through the sticking my head in the water was the first experience of snorkeling and being absolutely awestruck at some of the amazing marine life that I first saw. Still remember it now, 45 years later. Early on in my life, I also decided that come what may, there was no way I was going to let fear define me. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't acknowledge the fear and the presence because it has a message for us. Essentially, though, it is a choice about whether you acknowledge that and cope with it without going into emotion-focused coping, or you try and find a balanced way to navigate it. The other thing that I learned relatively early on was that I may not be the best, which is a really freeing thing to understand. But what that allowed me to do was focus on being good enough for the role, the position. And essentially, it really allowed me to become more humble, to reduce the pressure on myself, and just to focus on being the best that I could be. We have a saying in road racing, which is leaving it all out on the road, which is coming home knowing that you're spent and you've done your absolute best. In that way, you can live without regrets. There isn't a possibility of doing it any better. And it also helps you to be humble enough to accept criticism, to take the best out of that. So take the objective information and leave the projections or the other subjective information that doesn't serve you. I also was required to reinvent myself on multiple occasions after these supposed failures that turned out to be part of the journey. Some of these involved really big changes in my life. So shifting jobs and locations, had to do that on multiple occasions to follow my dreams. And that related to not being in a supportive environment, which I mentioned how you might need to think about that in my previous presentation. I sought further education and training where I felt the beliefs about myself were that I was inadequate. Again, learning to be better at what I could do so that I could be confident that I was offering a service that was equivalent to others. I found some amazing support, some really interesting and inspiring people along the road that provided that amazing and supportive environment where they really believed in me before I believed in myself. And those I'd put in the really inspiring coaching and support networks that I discovered by being forced to look outside of the environment that I found myself in. I also at some point focused on my students and clients' feedback of the services that I was offering when there didn't seem any other feedback for me. So just knowing that people valued what I had to offer was really sustaining. And sometimes I had to give myself periods of time to rebuild my confidence, especially after having skydiving colleagues screaming at me from a couple of inches away. And knowing that that would take time was just part of the journey. Not always pleasant, but certainly part of it. So in closing, I'd just like you to consider that you are the encyclopedia of yourself. You know yourself best. We're asking you to really stand by what you know about yourself, to think about what you stand for, how you can honor what's precious to you when the going gets tough, what you could fully commit to, because those are the things that are going to get you over the line, despite what others have got to say or think about you. I hope you find that meaningful, and it's certainly helped me on a lifelong journey, which has led me to the most amazing sense of satisfaction at times. I remember one day after about 7 or 8 skydives overseas in Japan, I sat there and watched the sun go down, and I felt completely content knowing that I'd looked after 7 individuals, 7 strangers' lives that day, and done not just a good enough job, but a really good job. So I absolutely enjoyed that sunset. Look forward to chatting to you in my next episode. Bye for now.